The worst betrayals, I've learned, don't announce themselves with a thunderclap. They arrive as a whisper, a subtle shift in the air you've grown accustomed to breathing. They are born in the quiet spaces of trust, nurtured by the blindness of affection, and they always come from the people you would have staked your life on. This isn't some hollow platitude you'd find overlaid on a sunset picture on social media. It is the brutal, jagged truth I learned 6 weeks before the day I was supposed to marry the love of my life. My name is Caleb Vance. I'm 35, and until recently, I was a man who believed he had finally found his forever in Serafina Monroe. To understand the depth of the fall, you must first understand the height from which I fell. My relationship with money has always been one of discipline born from necessity. I grew up in a house where the walls were thin and the arguments about overdue bills were thick. My father was a good man, a mechanic by day and a security guard by night, but his hands, calloused and grease-stained, could never quite hold on to enough to keep the storm clouds of debt at bay. I remember the shame of a disconnected phone line, the strategic dimming of lights to save electricity, the constant humming anxiety that was the soundtrack of my childhood. I swore to myself, in the quiet of my small bedroom, that my life would be different. While my college friends were celebrating their first real paychecks with downtown apartments and weekend trips to Vegas, I was living with 3 roommates in a place that perpetually smelled of damp towels and microwave pizza. Every spare dollar was funneled into a carefully managed investment portfolio. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic until the driver's side door refused to open from the outside. I brown-bagged my lunch every single day. My friends mocked my spreadsheets mercilessly until they hit 30, still drowning in student loans and credit card debt, while I had a 6-figure investment account and was closing on my first rental property. By 35, I was a financial consultant with a solid career, but my real pride came from my 3 modest but profitable rental houses in Austin. They weren't mansions, just simple, sturdy homes in decent school districts. They were my security, my proof that the ghosts of my childhood couldn't touch me. They were the product of sacrificed weekends, spent painting cabinets, and installing new fixtures while others were bar hopping. They were my fortress. Then I met Serafina. It was at a mutual friend's housewarming party. She walked in wearing a sapphire blue dress that matched her eyes, and I swear the gravitational pull of the entire room shifted in her direction. She wasn't just beautiful, she was luminous. But it wasn't just her looks that disarmed me. It was her wit, her intelligence, and a laugh that felt like coming home. We talked until 3 in the morning, finding common ground on everything from our love of true crime podcasts to our mutual hatred of cilantro. 6 months later, she moved into my downtown apartment. Looking back, the signs were there, small and seemingly insignificant, like tiny cracks in a foundation. The way she'd always seemed to have forgotten her wallet when the check arrived at dinner. Her vague talk of quitting her marketing job to find her passion, with no concrete plan for income. Her playful jabs at my boring investment strategy, suggesting I should live a little instead of saving so diligently. "Life is short, Caleb," she'd murmur, curled against me on the couch, a glass of expensive wine in her hand. "What's the point of all this money if we don't enjoy it?" I'd try to explain the concept of delayed gratification, of building a future, but she would just smile, kiss me, and change the subject. And I let her, because she made me happier than I had ever been. She was the color in my black and white world of spreadsheets and financial projections. The proposal happened during a weekend trip to Fredericksburg, under a sky streaked with the pink and orange of a Texas hill country sunset. The ring, a 1.8-carat oval diamond, wasn't the biggest rock in the world, but it was classic and elegant, just like her. She cried, said yes, and in that moment, I felt like the architect of a perfect future. "I want a spring wedding," she had whispered later that night. "Nothing too big, just something elegant and meaningful." I kissed her forehead, my heart swelling with a love so profound it felt like an ache. "Whatever you want, my love, as long as I get to call you my wife." We set the date, and that's when the first cracks in our foundation began to widen into fissures. The nothing too big wedding Serafina had envisioned began to grow, slowly at first, then with an insatiable, monstrous appetite. The charming local garden she had initially adored was suddenly deemed too simple. Instead, she fell in love with Barton Creek Resort, a venue whose price tag alone could have served as a down payment on a 4th property. "But it's just so perfect, Caleb," she argued, her eyes wide and pleading. "We only get married once, right?" It was a line that would become her mantra, the justification for every escalating expense. Then came the guest list. Our initial, intimate group of 80 people, ballooned to 170. I scanned the list, seeing names I'd never heard of. Third cousins from her mother's side, old family friends she hadn't seen in a decade. Family is everything, she insisted when I raised an eyebrow. Plus, they'll all bring generous gifts. It's an investment, really. An investment. The word sounded so foreign in this context. Still, I relented. I loved her, and I could afford it. My fortress was built to be shared. To manage the burgeoning costs, I suggested we open a joint bank account specifically for the wedding. A true partnership, I'd called it. Our first real financial commitment together. Serafina was enthusiastic. I transferred $30,000 to get us started, and she promised to match it with her year-end bonus. When the bonus came and went, and only $5,000 appeared from her side, she had a ready explanation. It was smaller than expected, a disappointment at work, and she'd make up the difference later. I didn't push. I didn't want to be the man my father was, constantly stressed and arguing about money. But then the strange transactions began. At first they were wedding adjacent, plausible enough that I could rationalize them. $400 at a high-end spa, a pre-wedding beauty regimen. $700 at Nordstrom, searching for the perfect rehearsal dinner outfit. $900 at a Michelin-starred restaurant, a tasting menu for a potential caterer. But they kept coming, a steady drain on the account with no corresponding vendors being booked. I brought it up gently one evening over dinner. Her reaction was swift and defensive. "Do you have any idea how stressful this is?" she said, her voice sharp. "These are all part of the process. The spa is for my skincare. The shopping is for our engagement photos. The dinner was to entertain my bridesmaids who are helping with everything." I backed off, retreating from the argument. The cost of peace, I told myself, was worth a few $1,000s. But a seed of unease had been planted. I started paying closer attention. The breaking point, the moment I can pinpoint where unease curdled into genuine alarm, came home early from work one afternoon. I walked in to find Serafina and her two bridesmaids, Alara and Amber, sprawled across the living room, empty wine bottles, standing like defeated soldiers on the coffee table. They were laughing, lost in their conversation, and didn't hear me enter. I stopped in the hallway, about to announce my arrival, when I overheard Serafina's voice, slick with giddy conspiracy. "So I just told him the cake was $1,200, but it's actually only $600. The rest is going toward my maid of honor weekend in Cabo." She giggled. "What he doesn't know won't hurt him, right?" Ilara looked uncomfortable. "Serafina, are you sure that's a good idea? Caleb's been so generous with everything." "Oh, please," Serafina waved a dismissive hand. "He can afford it. You should see his investment accounts. Besides, I deserve a little fun before I'm tied down forever." I cleared my throat. The sound was unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. 3 heads whipped around, and the color drained from Serafina's face. "Caleb," she gasped, attempting a smile that didn't reach her panicked eyes. "You're home early. We were just wedding planning." "Sounds like it," I said, my voice dangerously neutral. "Ilara, Amber, would you mind giving us a minute?" They scurried out, Alara refusing to meet my gaze. The moment the door clicked shut, Serafina launched her defense. "Before you get mad, it was just a joke. We were being silly." "A joke?" I repeated, my voice cold. "So you haven't been lying about wedding expenses and pocketing the difference?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. It was an eternity. "Of course not," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't believe you'd even think that." But her hesitation had already told me everything. That night, we had our first real fight. It was a dizzying performance on her part, alternating between righteous anger, tearful apologies, and accusations that I didn't trust her. She eventually admitted to having fudged a few numbers, but insisted it was no big deal. "Everyone does it, Caleb. Wedding budgets always have a little wiggle room." "This isn't about wiggle room, Serafina. It's about honesty. If you wanted money for a trip, you could have just asked me." "And would you have said yes?" she challenged, her eyes flashing. The honest answer was, I didn't know. But the lie felt infinitely worse than the request ever could have. We went to bed that night in a state of ceasefire, the issue unresolved. The next morning, she made my favorite breakfast and promised complete transparency moving forward. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But a crack had formed in the very foundation of my love for her, and I couldn't unsee it. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in emotional manipulation, and I, the unwitting student, was failing spectacularly. The first-class tickets for her parents, Marcus and Genevieve, for their 3-hour flight from Chicago, were explained away by her father's phantom back problems, a man I'd seen play a vigorous game of tennis just months prior. The charge was $1,800 from our wedding account. Then came the suite at the Four Seasons, because they were contributing so much emotionally to the wedding. Another $3,200. My contributions to the account had now neared $45,000. Hers remained at a paltry $8,000. When I pointed out this disparity, she unleashed the waterworks. "I can't believe you're keeping score," she sobbed. "This is our wedding, Caleb, not some business transaction. Do you even want to marry me?" And there it was, the ultimate trump card, the guilt trip that ended every financial discussion. I would apologize, she would forgive me, and the one-sided spending would continue. I was no longer a partner. I was a sponsor. The final, unthinkable demand came disguised as a peace offering. After another tense conversation about the budget, I came home the next evening to find our dining room transformed. Candles flickered, flowers filled the air with a sweet scent, and the aroma of beef Wellington, my favorite meal, wafted from the kitchen. "I hate fighting with you," she said, wrapping her arms around my neck, "especially over something as silly as money." The dinner was lovely. We talked, we laughed, and for a few hours, I allowed myself to believe that the woman I first fell for was still there. Later, as we were cuddled on the couch, she brought up her parents. "Mom keeps saying how happy she is that I found someone so stable and successful," she began, her voice soft and thoughtful. "They've always worried about me, you know. Dad's retirement didn't go as planned, and they had to downsize their house. They're just renting now." I nodded sympathetically. I had heard bits of this before. "Actually," she continued, and her voice took on a careful, measured tone that immediately put me on high alert. "I've been thinking about how we could help them." "And help them how?" She took a deep breath, turning to face me fully. "What if we gave them one of your rental properties? The one on Oakwood Drive. It's the smallest one, and you always say it gives you the most maintenance headaches." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the words. I waited for the punchline, for her to burst out laughing at the absurdity of it, but her expression was one of deadly seriousness. "You want to give your parents a house?" My voice was barely a whisper. "My house? The one worth nearly $500,000? It would be our house once we're married," she corrected gently. "And yes, think about it, Caleb. It would solve all their financial problems. They could live there rent-free. It would give them security." The room suddenly felt cold. The warmth from the wine and the good meal evaporated, replaced by an icy dread. "Serafina, that house is a cornerstone of our retirement plan. It's an investment I worked for years to afford." "But we don't need it," she insisted, her voice gaining intensity. "You have 2 others, plus your job, plus my income when I find my passion. We're fine. They're struggling. We can help them in other ways," I countered, trying to keep my voice level. "Maybe we cover some of their expenses each month." "They don't want charity, Caleb. They want security. Having their own property would give them that." "It's not charity when it's their daughter helping." My voice was rising now, despite my best efforts. "But it is charity when it's me giving away a house I bled for to people I've met 4 times. Her eyes narrowed. "I thought you were generous. I thought family meant something to you." "My generosity doesn't extend to giving away a $500,000 asset as a party favor, Serafina, and they are not my family yet." Well, they will be in 2 months," she said, letting the words hang in the air. Unless what?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Unless you're not as committed to this marriage, to us, as you claim to be." And there it was. The ultimatum, thinly veiled but unmistakable. The house for the marriage, my security for her families, fell. I felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if I were looking at a stranger. The loving, laughing woman I had planned to spend my life with had been replaced by a cold-eyed negotiator. "This is a huge decision, Serafina," I said, buying time, trying to find my footing. "We can't make it impulsively. Let's sleep on it." She didn't look happy, but she agreed. We went to bed with a chasm of tension between us wider and deeper than any argument we'd had before. This wasn't about a wedding venue or first-class tickets. This was about the fundamental nature of our partnership. And I had a sickening feeling that I had been fundamentally wrong about it from the very beginning. The next morning, Serafina left early for a supposed wedding emergency with her bridesmaids, a convenient excuse that gave me the space I desperately needed. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. Her demand replayed itself over and over. each word a hammer blow against the crumbling facade of our relationship. A hunch, a desperate, nagging suspicion, compelled me to act. I picked up my phone and called Brian, my longtime property manager who oversaw all three of my rentals. "Hey, Brian, quick question for you," I said, trying to sound casual. "Has anyone come by to look at the Oakwood property recently? Anyone who isn't a tenant?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, actually," he said, his voice hesitant. "A couple in their 60s. Said they were friends of yours and were considering buying a similar property in the neighborhood, wanted to see the layout. The tenants weren't happy about the short notice, but since you had apparently approved it, a block of ice formed in my stomach." "When was this, Brian?" "About 3 weeks ago. The woman who arranged it, she said she was your fiancée, Serafina." Right. Thanks, Brian." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. 3 weeks ago, she had taken her parents to inspect the house, my house, long before she had ever mentioned the idea to me. She wasn't asking for a gift. She was finalizing a transaction I hadn't even known was on the table. That single revelation opened the floodgates. The trust I had so freely given her was not just broken. It felt like it had been a figment of my imagination all along. Driven by a cold, sickening certainty, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my laptop and navigated to her email login page. Her password, pathetically, was our anniversary date, not exactly Fort Knox security. The inbox loaded, and my world tilted on its axis. It didn't take long to find the evidence. It was all there, a digital paper trail of her deception. First, an email chain with a property appraiser from a month earlier, requesting a full valuation of the Oakwood house. Then, messages to her parents, Marcus and Genevieve. They weren't conversations about asking for my help. They were planning sessions. They discussed how they could best manage the property for extra income after the wedding, whether they should live in it or rent it out. They talked about me not as a future son-in-law, but as a resource, a means to an end. And then, the final, damning piece. A drafted email, unsent, to a family lawyer. The subject line was, "Interspousal Property Transfer Inquiry." In it, Serafina asked about the legalities and tax implications of transferring property between spouses after a marriage. The plan was clear. She was going to wait until we were legally married, until she had a greater claim to my assets, before making her final move. The beautiful, charming woman I had fallen in love with was a predator, and I was the prey she had been carefully grooming for 2 years. I spent the rest of the day in a state of numb shock, printing out every piece of evidence. Each page that emerged from the printer felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. When she came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. I had poured myself a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid doing little to warm the ice in my veins. The printed emails were arranged in a neat folder on the coffee table between us. "How was your emergency meeting?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "Oh, exhausting," she sighed dramatically, dropping her purse on a chair. "Bridesmaid drama. You wouldn't believe it." I took a slow sip of my drink. "Hey, I've been thinking about what you said, about the house." Her face brightened instantly, a predatory gleam in her eyes that I had never noticed before, but now couldn't miss. "Really? And what are your thoughts?" "I'm curious," I said, leaning forward. "When did you first get the idea to give your parents my property?" She shrugged, a picture of innocence. "It just came to me recently, seeing how much they're struggling." "Why?" "Recently?" I mused. "Not say a month ago when you had the property appraised, or 3 weeks ago when you took them to see it without telling me." The color drained from her face. It was the same look of panic I'd seen when I caught her talking about the wedding cake, but this time there was no escape. What are you talking about?" she stammered. I slid the folder across the coffee table toward her. "You should have used a different password for your email, or at least deleted your messages with the appraiser and the lawyer." She stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake, refusing to touch it. "You went through my email? That's a complete violation of my privacy." "Funny," I said with a bitter laugh. "How that's your first concern, not the fact that you were actively planning to defraud me of my property." "Our property," she corrected automatically, a reflexive slip that revealed everything. "No, Serafina, my property. Bought with my money years before I ever met you. Property you apparently felt entitled to give away without my knowledge or consent." She switched tactics, the anger melting away into tears. It was a performance I had seen before, but now the curtains were pulled back. I could see all the strings. "I can't believe you don't trust me," she wept. "After everything, you spy on me and accuse me of being what? A gold digger? Is that what you think of me? I think, I said slowly, deliberately, that you've been systematically looting our wedding fund. I think you lied about contributing your share. And I think you were planning to wait until after we were married to push for this property transfer because you believed you'd have more legal leverage. That's what I think. That's ridiculous. I love you, Caleb. I want to marry you for who you are, not for what you own. Prove it, I challenged, my voice hard as steel. Call your parents right now. Tell them they won't be getting my house. Tell them we'll help them in a more reasonable way, a monthly stipend perhaps. Let's just see how they react. Her expression hardened, the tears vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. I'm not calling my parents so you can test them like some sick game. Because you know exactly what they'll say, I shot back. They'll be furious that their golden goose is backing out. Don't you dare speak about my family that way, she shouted, jumping to her feet. They are good people who have had bad luck. Not that you'd understand, with your precious financial discipline and your rental properties. I struggled too, I roared, the pain and fury of a lifetime of work being dismissed so casually erupting from me. I worked my ass off for everything I have. I didn't expect anyone to hand me a $500,000 house as a wedding present. She stopped pacing and looked me dead in the eye, her face a mask of cold fury. Then the wedding is off. The words, though expected, still hit me with the force of a physical blow. You're calling off our wedding because I won't give your parents a house? I'm calling it off because you clearly don't value my family, she retorted. Because you don't trust me. Because you'd rather believe I'm some kind of con artist than the woman who loves you. I took a long, steadying breath. The anger was receding, replaced by a strange, chilling calm. The ordeal was over. Serafina, I wanted to build a life with you, I said quietly. But this, the secret plans, the lies, the ultimatums, this isn't love. It's a hostile takeover. This is manipulation. So that's your final answer? My parents get nothing? Your parents get a son-in-law who respects boundaries and doesn't get guilted into catastrophic financial decisions. Or they get nothing at all. Your choice. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face again, but now I could see the cold calculation behind them. She was weighing her options and realizing she had lost. Then I choose nothing at all. I nodded slowly. I'll pack a bag and stay at a hotel tonight. We can figure out the logistics of this tomorrow. As I packed, I could hear her on the phone in the living room, her voice loud and theatrical, spinning her version of the story to her mother, then to her bridesmaids. I was the villain, the cold-hearted miser who had betrayed her. When I emerged with my suitcase, she was curled on the couch, the picture of a heartbroken victim. For one fleeting, insane moment, I felt a pang of doubt. Had I overreacted? Serafina, I started softly, if you want to talk about this rationally. She looked up, and for a split second, I saw it again, the flash of calculation, before it was replaced by righteous anger. There's nothing to talk about. You've made your position clear. So have I. And that was it. I walked out the door, leaving behind the ruins of a 2-year relationship, a canceled wedding, and the ghost of a woman I never really knew. The days that followed were a blur of grim logistics. Canceling vendors was a particularly painful exercise in financial loss. Each phone call was a fresh reminder of the future that had been stolen, and each cancellation fee totaling over $15,000 was the price of my naivete. But as I watched the money drain away, a single thought kept me sane. At least it wasn't a house. News of our breakup spread through our social circles like a virus. Serafina's version, where I was the controlling, tight-fisted villain who refused to help her struggling parents, gained traction among her friends. My version, where she had issued a financially insane ultimatum, resonated with mine. Most of our mutual friends offered clipped, diplomatic condolences and then retreated to a safe distance. During this process, I returned to the apartment to collect more of my things while she was at work. It was a strange, hollow experience, packing up a life we were supposed to build together. On my way out, I checked the mail and found a bank statement for our joint wedding account. My blood ran cold. The day after our fight, she had withdrawn the entire remaining balance, nearly $22,000 of my money. Legally, I could have fought it, but my lawyer advised against it. Sometimes the cheapest way to pay is with money, Caleb, he had said. He was right. Consider it a severance package. A fee for discovering her true character before our lives were legally entangled. The true extent of her family's involvement became terrifyingly clear about 10 days after the breakup. Her father, Marcus Monroe, a man whose handshake had always felt a little too firm, a little too eager, showed up unannounced at my office. He somehow talked his way past reception, claiming to be family. "We need to talk, son, man to man," he said, closing my office door behind him. "I'm not your son, Marcus, and we have nothing to discuss." He sat down, his expression a mask of paternal concern. "Look, I know things ended badly, but this is about doing the right thing. That was all a misunderstanding. Serafina just got ahead of herself. Her heart was in the right place. Her heart was set on my house, Marcus, and you were more than happy to go along with it." His facade of reasonableness slipped. "That house was going to be a wedding gift, a show of good faith. Now you've humiliated my daughter and left her with nothing." "She walked away with $22,000 of my money," I pointed out calmly. "Pocket change for someone like you," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. And there it was, the confirmation. They didn't see me as a person, but as a walking, talking bank account. His voice darkened. "You listen to me. You think you're so smart catching us out. You've made an enemy you can't afford. Austin's a small town. I have friends here. Your reputation won't survive this." "Is that a threat, Marcus?" "It's a promise," he hissed. He was true to his word. Vicious rumors began to circulate in my professional circles that I was financially unstable, that I was emotionally abusive, that I was unreliable. Thankfully, my track record and years of building a solid reputation acted as a shield. But the smear campaign was a constant, draining battle. It was during this period of turmoil that I ran into Alara, Serafina's former bridesmaid, at a coffee shop. She waved me over, her expression a mixture of pity and concern. "Caleb," she said, "I know it's not my place, but there's something you should know." She told me that her friendship with Serafina had ended. The reason? Serafina had expected to stay in my apartment, rent-free, until the lease ended and had demanded I cover her moving expenses because I was the one with all the money. When Alara suggested this was unreasonable, Serafina had accused her of taking my side. "It was illuminating," Alara said, stirring her coffee. "You know, she talked about your financial situation a lot, even before you were engaged. She'd mention your properties, your investments. At the time, I just thought she was proud of you. Now," she trailed off, "now I wonder if she was just scouting." The confirmation was chilling, but also strangely liberating. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't failed the relationship. I had just been the target of a long con. As I was about to leave, Alara called after me. "There's something else. Serafina's been seeing someone, some real estate developer. She met at a charity event 2 weeks ago. His name is Sterling Hayes." 2 weeks. It had taken her only 2 weeks to find a new target. The grief I had been carrying began to transform into something else. A cold, hard resolve to move on and never look back. 2 months after our breakup, life was beginning to find a new, quieter rhythm. I was settling into a new apartment, focusing on my work, and slowly rebuilding the perimeter of the fortress Serafina had so nearly breached. Then, I received a phone call from Brian, my property manager, and the amusement in his voice was unmistakable. "You'll never guess who just applied to rent the Oakwood property," he said. I had no idea. "Who?" "Serafina Monroe and a Mr. Sterling Hayes." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The very house she had tried to extort from me, the symbol of her ultimate betrayal, she was now trying to rent. "Apparently," Brian continued, "those rumors about her new boyfriend's projects being in trouble are true. His finances aren't as solid as she thought. They're looking for a temporary place." "What did you tell them?" I asked, a grim smile spreading across my face. "That the property was no longer available," Brian chuckled. "I didn't mention who owned it, but I wish I could have seen her face when she eventually found out." Later that day, I received one final text from her. "Real mature, Caleb. Denying our application out of spite. Sterling says it's a blessing in disguise. The house was overpriced anyway." I didn't bother responding. There was nothing left to say. The final act of the drama came a month later. Amber, her other bridesmaid, reached out to me. She told me Serafina and Sterling had broken up. He had discovered she'd been secretly charging thousands of dollars in designer clothes and spa treatments to his credit cards. When confronted, she had apparently screamed that she deserved it after what I put her through. "She's desperate now, Caleb," Amber warned me. "Her parents are pressuring her to find someone stable again. She's been talking about reconnecting with you, saying she made a terrible mistake." The warning was timely. A week later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, and there she was. Serafina Monroe, looking subdued and contrite, a carefully crafted performance of remorse on her face. "Caleb," she said softly when I opened the door, "can we please talk? We have nothing to say to each other, Serafina." "Please," she begged, attempting to step closer. I held my ground, blocking the doorway. "I've changed. I've realized what's truly important. I made a terrible mistake. I was scared about my parents' situation, and I handled it all wrong." Did you handle Sterling Hayes all wrong too?" I asked pointedly. She flinched, a flicker of genuine anger crossing her face before she controlled it. "That was different. Sterling and I weren't right for each other. Because he caught you stealing from him," I supplied. "That's not what happened," she snapped before softening her expression again. "I'm not here about Sterling. I'm here about us. About the connection we had. That was real. There is no us, Serafina. There's you, looking for financial security at any cost. And there's me, eternally grateful I discovered that before we signed a marriage certificate." She tried a different angle, the tears welling up on cue. "My parents are really struggling, Caleb. Dad's medical bills are piling up. They might lose their rental." "That's not my problem," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "And the fact that you are still trying to use them to manipulate me right now just proves I made the right decision." The facade finally, completely crumbled. Her face contorted with a rage that was far more honest than any tears she had ever shed. "You heartless bastard," she hissed. "You think you're so much better than everyone. With your financial planning and your precious investment properties, you'll end up alone with your money, and I hope it keeps you warm at night." "Oh, better to be alone," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "than to be with someone who sees me as an ATM instead of a partner. Goodbye, Serafina." I closed the door on her mid-protest, the sound echoing the finality of my decision. I blocked her number on my phone and felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. 6 months after what should have been our wedding day, I heard through the grapevine that Serafina had moved back to Chicago to live with her parents. Her reputation in Austin had been sufficiently tarnished. Too many people had seen her true colors. As for me, I kept the house on Oakwood Drive. I renovated it, fixing the maintenance issues that had always plagued it. It now generates more reliable income than ever before. My business thrived, the smear campaign having faded into irrelevant gossip. The engagement ring sits in a safe deposit box at my bank. For a while I considered selling it, but I've decided to keep it, not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. It's a reminder of what happens when you ignore the quiet whispers of doubt. A reminder of the price of blind trust. Perhaps someday I'll sell it and use the money for a down payment on a fourth property. It would be a fitting end, turning a symbol of calculated manipulation into another brick in the fortress of my own hard-won security. A fortress built for one, for now, but one that is, finally, impenetrable.